many other...
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I am Caroline Malone. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll get you updates on stories developing around the world. First, the headlines. The city hosting the Olympic Games, Tokyo, records an all-time daily high of COVID cases. The Tokyo governor raises an alarm, says the healthcare system is in an extremely severe situation. Russia reports 799 coronavirus-related deaths on Thursday, a high it's reached 3 times in the last month, with over 23,000 new COVID-19 cases. Amid a surge in cases across the United States, New York is requiring all employees be vaccinated against COVID-19. The New York City mayor announces a plan to offer $100 if residents get jabbed from a city-run vaccination site. In a major breakthrough, the US Senate votes to advance a historic $1 trillion infrastructure package that President Joe Biden has said could transform America. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that nuclear talks with Iran cannot go on indefinitely, but he says that Washington is fully prepared to continue negotiations. Well, South Africa will send 1,500 troops to help neighbour Mozambique fight an Islamic State-linked insurgency. The deployment will cost South Africa about $66 million. Well, the United States Senate has voted to begin work on a historic $1 trillion national infrastructure plan. This after President Joe Biden and a bipartisan group of senators reached an agreement on major provisions of the package. With a rare bipartisan showing on a 67-32 vote, the bill has passed a key milestone. The bill, however, still needs to clear the House of Representatives, where some opposition is expected from progressive Democrats.
On this vote, the yeas are 67, the nays are 32.
After a week of bitter negotiations, the US Senate voted to advance a historic $1 trillion infrastructure package. The deal, if passed by Congress and signed into law, would pump historic levels of federal funding into fixing the roads, bridges and waterways and ensure broadband internet for all Americans. The bipartisan measures passed 67-32. With 17 Republicans joining 50 Democrats to formally begin the debate on the bill, which US President Joe Biden says could transform America.
Mr. President, I want to commend the group of senators who worked with President Biden to reach an agreement on a bipartisan infrastructure bill. The Senate has just come together and in a strong bipartisan fashion voted to begin the legislative process here on the Senate floor.
At a time when Washington seems broken, this group of members behind me came together, along with others, and decided we were going to do something great for our country. Every American believes that roads and bridges, ports and waterways, even our digital infrastructure needs to be updated.
But what does this bill entail? It includes $550 billion in new spending. The deal will make the largest ever federal investments in public transit, drinking and wastewater infrastructure, passenger rail, bridges and national highways. It also aims to tackle climate crisis by investing in clean energy projects. This includes electrification of schools and transit buses. According to a White House statement, the deal will create millions of good jobs. It will help make the US economy robust, sustainable, resilient and just.
We have not made a major investment
in the infrastructure of the United States of America for the last 30 years. First time. And when you see the bipartisanship here, bipartisanship is built because of relationships. Relationships are built when there's trust. And the more we continue to do things such as this, the more you'll see more bipartisanship.
This is truly a night to celebrate not only a long overdue, much needed investment in our infrastructure, an investment that administration after administration has called for, but that has not been delivered to the American people, but also to celebrate bipartisanship. We have shown tonight, we've shown America tonight, that we can work together.
The bipartisan group negotiating the blueprint overcame a key sticking point: how to pay for the spending. The White House says the revenue would come from redirecting unspent COVID emergency relief funds, boosting corporate fee, and strengthening tax enforcement on cryptocurrencies. Former President Donald Trump pushed back strongly against the bipartisan bill. He said that the deal is a loser for the USA, a terrible deal, and makes the Republicans look weak, foolish, and dumb. The bill, however, still needs to clear the House of Representatives, where it could face resistance from progressive Democrats. Some have warned that the progressives may not sign the bill unless the $3.5 trillion budget package includes spending on healthcare, education, social welfare, and climate action. This would be a separate bill that the Democrats plan to pass without Republican support and is expected to get a floor vote before the Senate breaks for its recess. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, it took just 2 months for the United States to reimpose a mask mandate as the Delta variant spreads rapidly. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has urged citizens to put their masks back on. Well, the White House and many other federal agencies have issued a new memo. All members, vaccinated or not vaccinated, will be required to wear masks inside the House at all times. Well, President Joe Biden was seen wearing a mask on his return to the White House from a trip to Pennsylvania. On Capitol Hill, some Republicans were in revolt at this decision. Well, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said, and I quote, "The mask rule is not based on science, but is conjured up by liberals who want to continue to live in a perpetual pandemic state." Well, in New York, all state employees will be asked to get themselves vaccinated or tested for COVID-19. The New York governor has said that the state needs to take extreme steps to avoid hospitals from getting overwhelmed. Due to rampant vaccine hesitancy in the city, New York will be handing out $100 bills to everyone getting jabbed from a state-run centre.
President Biden is reported that he's going to announce soon that all federal employees must be vaccinated or get tested. New York State is doing the same. And we're working with our unions to implement this quickly and fairly. But we want to get it done by Labor Day. And I encourage all local governments to do the same.
Well, big tech companies like Apple, Google and Facebook have also brought in the vaccine mandate in their policies. Only fully vaccinated people will be allowed to step back into offices. According to Bloomberg, Apple plans to restore its mask requirement policy at most of its US retail stores, both for customers and staffers. The mandate will include vaccinated people as well. This comes at a time when many tech companies like Microsoft and Uber are mulling over calling their employees back to offline mode. Well, experts say the latest rise in the Delta variant cases might hinder the back-to-office process. Since the start of July, the worst-hit nation has seen an uptick in daily cases again. The US is recording 60 to 70,000 cases every day. This, even though more than 49% of the population are fully vaccinated and 57% of people have received at least one dose. Well, experts hope mask and vaccine mandates will help the US overcome the new wave of infections. Well, New York was one of the worst affected cities in the world by the coronavirus. At one point during the pandemic, New York City was recording a higher number of cases in a day than other countries. And the pandemic challenged the healthcare system. As the Delta variant spreads, state officials are bracing to avoid a similar situation in the future. Our correspondent Suzanne Tehrani gives you a report from Ground Zero.
A new incentive for New Yorkers to get vaccinated. Starting this Friday, anyone who goes to a city-run vaccination site for their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine will receive $100.
We'll say thank you. We'll say we're really glad that you got vaccinated for yourself, for your family, for your community. And here's $100 to thank you for doing the right thing and to encourage people.
According to New York State Department of Health data, between 45% and 65% of New York City residents are fully vaccinated.
New York City, once the epicenter of the coronavirus pandemic in all of the United States, has relied heavily on vaccinations to keep the numbers down. However, since April, the number of New Yorkers getting vaccinated has dropped significantly, with concerns of a possible surge in coronavirus cases with the new Delta variant and the impact it will have on New Yorkers' lives. It seems that state and city officials are doing everything possible to encourage people to get vaccinated.
The mayor's announcement on Wednesday comes just days after he said all city workers would have to be vaccinated or go through strict weekly testing protocols.
President Biden is reported that he's going to announce soon that all federal employees must be vaccinated or get tested. New York State is doing the same. And we're working with our unions to implement this quickly and fairly. But we want to get it done by Labor Day. And I encourage all local governments to do the same.
Cases are on the rise in New York City, driven by the explosion of the Delta variant. Last Friday, the rolling average of new daily cases was 32% higher than a week prior. Meanwhile, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has suggested that cities in high transmission areas, which includes New York City, should, quote, seriously consider adopting the new CDC guidelines on indoor masking, even for vaccinated people. He stopped short, however, of fully mandating it, for now at least. Susan Tehrani from New York for WION. World is One.
Well, moving on to Japan now. Even after reporting the highest daily jump in COVID infections among Tokyo Games participants in a day, Olympics organisers have dismissed any link to rising cases in the country. At least 193 athletes, media and Olympic employees have now tested positive for the virus. These figures do not include some cases at airports and in training camps. Well, on Wednesday, Japan for the first time recorded over 9,000 daily coronavirus cases. Days after the start of the Olympics, the daily cases in Tokyo were also at a record 3,177 cases. The International Olympic Committee spokesman, Mark Adams, said there was nothing to suggest a link between the Games and the rising figures. Experts have warned the rising number of cases could lead to a healthcare crisis. But organisers insist the Games are not putting additional pressure on Japan's medical system. They also say that only 2 people associated with the Games are in hospital, while half of all those needing care are being looked after by their own medical teams.
The perception of how these Games are, I think it's very, very important with the Japanese public that we reassure them, and I'm sorry for those that have been here for many of the press conferences for me to go over this again, but you know about the amazing level of testing and the fact that, in fact, to a large extent, there is really no contact between the general public and the Games organisers on a day-to-day basis. It's very important.
Well, the rapid rise in new infections is spurred by the more contagious Delta variant. Tokyo is already under a virus state of emergency with shortened restaurant and bar opening hours and a ban on those places selling alcohol. But experts say the limits do not appear to be working and have warned people not to drop their guard. Many Japanese are worried the influx of athletes and officials for the Games will add to the surge. Well, experts have warned that holding the high-profile sports event sends a confusing message about the need to stay home. Well, according to Japan's chief cabinet secretary, the capital has never experienced such a fast spread of the coronavirus. A top government advisor has warned that the current situation is the worst ever.
東京を中心とする首都圏だけではなく、関西圏をはじめ全国の多くの地域で新規感染者数が増加傾向となっており、これまでに経験したことのない感染拡大となっている。
Well, Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike said that the COVID-19 infection rates and the medical care provision system are both in an extremely severe situation. He also urged people to further decrease interaction to compensate for the infectiousness of the Delta variant.
It has been recognized that both the infection situation and the pressure on the medical care provision system is extremely severe. However, this highly infectious Delta strain is progressing, and to reduce the number of new cases, we talked about how it is necessary to further reduce the movement of people, aiming for the same number as at the time of previous state of emergency declaration.
Well, the surge also spells trouble for Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, whose support ratings are at their lowest since he took office last September. Only 26.5% of residents of Japan are fully vaccinated, and the rollout has hit supply snags recently. Well, moving on to Southeast Asia, where Myanmar is not just battling a political crisis, but is also struggling with a surging wave of coronavirus infections. In many parts of the country, people were seen making desperate efforts to find oxygen. Myanmar's military ruler is now looking for greater cooperation with the international community to contain the virus.
Myanmar's military called for international help on Wednesday as the country battles a surging wave of COVID infections. It marks a shift in tone for the military, left largely isolated by the rest of the globe when they seized power in a coup earlier this year. The junta leader said vaccinations need to be increased and called for cooperation with fellow ASEAN and, quote, friendly countries. Nations, including the US and Britain, have slapped sanctions on the military rulers over the coup and repression of pro-democracy protesters. Efforts to contain the virus have been hampered by floods. In Karen State, bordering Thailand, photos reveal scenes of horror as healthcare workers wade through floodwaters, carrying patients on beds, weak and desperate for oxygen, or worried that staying at home could spread to other family members. The fast-growing outbreak amid ongoing chaos in the wake of the coup has exacerbated efforts by medics and funeral services working around the clock. The military has been wary of outside help in past disasters, forcing Myanmar's people to help each other. Though a previous administration did allow in aid via ASEAN after a devastating cyclone in 2008, only 3% of Myanmar's population are vaccinated, according to a Reuters tracker. 40,000 inmates in densely packed prisons are a major concern. The official infection number since June is nearly 5,000, but medics and funeral services say the actual infection and death toll is much higher. Myanmar's military has also arrested several doctors treating COVID-19 patients independently.
Well, the crisis in Tigray is nowhere near its end. Thousands in the war-torn region of Ethiopia are facing the world's worst famine. Issuing a grim warning, the United Nations has said that current food rations in Tigray could run out within days unless critical aid routes are opened. Our next report has those details.
Over 24,000 Eritrean refugees trapped in camps in Ethiopia's Tigray are starving to death. Refugees in camps have been cut off from humanitarian aid and are running out of food. The United Nations has warned that food rations are on the verge of completely running out very soon.
The UN Refugee Agency is extremely worried about the fate of thousands of Eritrean refugees currently trapped inside 2 refugee camps in Ethiopia's Tigray region as fighting between armed groups escalates in and around the refugee camps. An estimated 24,000 Eritrean refugees in Mai Eni and Adi Harush camps in Tigray's Mai Serbi area are facing intimidation, harassment, and are living in constant anguish, being cut off from humanitarian assistance.
The last food distribution to both refugee camps was in late June, providing rations for just 1 month. There has been a worrisome increase in the number of cases of severe malnutrition among children. Supply of essential, ready-to-use formula to treat thousands of severely malnourished children is also running out. Access into the region was cut off last week after the only available route for aid delivery was made inaccessible after an attack on a World Food Programme convoy. About 150 trucks with food and other supplies are being held in the Semera region pending security clearances. International pressure is rising on Ethiopia's government to allow the desperately needed food supply into Tigray. Aid hasn't reached some communities since the war started in November. The government has blamed the aid delivery problem on provocations by Tigray forces. Conflict broke out between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front in November. 3 weeks later, the government seized control of Tigray's capital Mekele and declared victory. But the TPLF kept fighting and in a stunning twist at the end of June, retook Mekele and most of Tigray after government soldiers withdrew. The fighting has heightened the humanitarian crisis in the region, where the UN has already warned that 400,000 people have been pushed into famine. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Well, that's all we have on this edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION, World is One.
There are many other... this is right, Arab.